Imagine that we all could be Iron Man or Superwoman. These were the words a friend of mine used the first time she tried to explain exoskeletons to me. She talked about being able to raise a pen by yourself for the first time during her whole career as a lawyer. She continued on speaking about eye tracking and about that helping her being able to faster prepare for court proceedings. Technological and digital development is right now advancing at a furious pace. Artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and new ways of performing tasks using technology constitute promises of a world and a work life where no one is left behind. A world where every human being has the opportunity to get a job with decent working conditions. The global goals and the 2030s Agenda for Sustainable Development is a global political commitment to such a world with increased participation for people with disabilities in the labour market. In the Nordic countries, a new Nordic vision sets the goal that in 10 years, the Nordic countries will be the most sustainable and integrated region in the world, providing inclusion and equality. So how can new technology, artificial intelligence, and digitalization help governments across the globe to fulfill the right to an inclusive work life? And how do we make sure that this fast advancement actually constitutes and creates possibilities rather than consolidates negative attitudes and the notion that disabilities are conditions that need to be fixed to fit into the labour market? How do we do all this with a human rights lens on, with working with non-discrimination and with a focus on universal design? Welcome to this webinar, Inclusive Future of Work Life, a half-day conference arranged by the Nordic Welfare Center and the Swedish Public Employment Service. Today, some of the leading researchers within this area and the leading practitioners will give us their insights on the impact of technology for people with disabilities in the labour market. My name is Hanna Gerdes. I'm a Swedish human rights lawyer and educator, and I'm the founder of Hanna and Goliath Law and Education. And today I've been given the task to moderate this very important webinar. This webinar will end at 4 o'clock. And we will be taking short breaks at about 10 to 2, at 2:25, and at 3:15. Here in the studio today, it's only me and Lars Lindberg and the technical staff, since we are trying to make it as corona safe as possible. With us, however, and as a part of our team today, we also have Emily Smedslund, who works at the Nordic Welfare Center, and she will be the one replying to your questions. So, hi, Emily, can you just wave hi? So now you also see Emily. Now, I actually would like to continue with asking some questions, and I would like to ask them to a very important person here today that's actually here with me in the studio, and that's Lars Lindberg. Lars Lindberg is a senior advisor at the Nordic Welfare Center, and he has a long experience of working with disability policy in Sweden. Amongst many things, Lars has worked at the Ministry of Social Affairs with responsibility for coordinating disability policy, and also as a head of the Accessibility Center at the Disability Ombudsman in Sweden. Lars is also now a project manager at the Nordic Welfare Center and the host for today's seminar. Oh, and he just joined me here from behind. Hi. So I would like to start off by actually asking you a question, Lars. When I say inclusive work life and the future labour market, what do you think about?
Thank you, Hanna. First and foremost, I think about that it's so important that everyone should have an opportunity to contribute in working life. And it's so important, as we all know, this question of livelihood, personal development and so on. But we do know also that so many people with disabilities that do not have jobs or don't have the opportunities to participate in working life as they want to do. I think there is a glass ceiling in many ways that is due to, amongst many things, lack of accessibility, discrimination, and it's so important to emphasize that the focus must be to ensure that the workplaces are accessible and to take advantage of the opportunities that the technology provides today. A friend of mine went blind 20 years ago, and she said often that she went blind in the right time of her life because there are so many opportunities today and so on. But and say maybe in the future, in the short future, I maybe could drive a driverless car. On the other hand, we also know that technology can create new barriers, and this technology is a double-edged sword. So we have to be realistic. But these barriers, they are man-made, and therefore something we can eliminate and choose to avoid.
So the barriers are man-made, and you talked about the glass ceiling. But then, of course, I have to ask you, since, I mean, you're a project manager at the Nordic Welfare Center, and you're responsible for your work. So what have you done to, like, shatter this glass ceiling? What are you doing to create a more inclusive labor market?
I work at the Nordic Welfare Center, which is an institution under the Nordic Council of Ministers. And this project started 2019 and will end this summer. And it's commissioned by the Nordic Labour Market Committee. And in this project, we have worked very closely together with the labour market authorities in the Nordic countries. And we are conducting this webinar today in collaboration with the Swedish Employment Service, which we are very happy about. In the project, we have consist of different parts, but we would produce some publications. The first one is a compilation of knowledge about research and research needs on digital and technical solutions. And it was published this spring. I think you will get a link in the chat from Emily. Secondly, a sample collection of digital and technical solutions also will be published within a few weeks. And thirdly, there will be a toolbox that will be a support for employers, employees, and professional groups who work with assistive technology and workplace adaptation. And this toolbox will be published also in June. So in a couple of weeks.
So, for example, there's almost 450 people joining us today. So, if they want to have this toolbox, what should they do? Where will they find this toolbox? Can you find it in your webpage? Where do you find the toolbox?
I don't know.
You probably will be able to find the toolbox, I guess, on your webpage.
Toolbox, yeah. The most difficulty in the project has partly that the development is one hand is so very fast, and the other hand that we cannot see that it has given so much big impact yet when it comes to technology and working life. The researchers who produced the compilation of research and knowledge, they couldn't find so much research that we had expected. So instead we have to look elsewhere. We have to find an example from conferences and innovation competitions. A lot of a big digging job quite simply.
So there's been a lot of difficulties, finding information actually and with the research. Can I ask you something? Do you have any hopes for the future?
Yes, on one hand, I think this webinar is a very important focus on the technology. I think we must work to ensure that working life, the programs and the tools we are using in workplaces and in working life are accessible. On the other hand, also to utilize the potential that exists in technology. And to technology, assistive technology, and devices are not themselves a quick fix. We know this is a complex issue from unemployment to work. But it's an important piece for the puzzle. So people with disability want to work, and they are a resource in society. But then we must remove the barriers, and then we can technology could be a help in that process.
So what are your expectations for this afternoon, for this webinar? What's your expectations?
No, it's so exciting to listen to all the different voices and the presenters that participate today. There are so many knowledgeable persons. So, and above all that, of course, so glad to see that so many participants and registered to this webinar. I'm very happy that we have the collaboration with the Swedish Employment Service, and I hope that this day will lead to some kind of new thought, new idea that can contribute altogether to a more inclusive working life.
Thank you so much, Lars.
Thank you.
We will now start off with the first part of this afternoon, and I just want to remind you that please feel free to ask questions to all the participants throughout the whole webinar. And you do this by going into sli.do, you write that, and then you write the code 034370, and you will be able to ask questions. And you can also just turn your device, your iPhone or iPad or something, towards the QR code that is now shown also in the picture, if you can see that. So otherwise go into sli.do and write 034370, and you will get into Slido where you will be able to ask all your questions. Let's start off with looking closer at how can artificial intelligence become a door opener to working life for people with disabilities. To give us a brief note on this, today we have with us Hector Minto. He is a senior technology evangelist for accessibility issues at Microsoft. Hector Minto has worked in the field of assistive technology and alternative communication and special education needs for 25 years, including at many Nordic assistive technology companies. So he also has a great knowledge of the Nordic countries. Hector focuses on being on emerging technologies and how to maximize its effectiveness across a wide range of different issues for people with disabilities, physical learning and sensory disabilities. So I'm going to actually hand over to you, Hector. We're very happy that you're joining us today.
Thank you, Hannah. Great to be with you all. Great to be back in the Nordics. Has spent many happy years in the region, so great to reconnect. Shall I start?
Yeah, you can start your presentation. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so look, great to be back with you. And I'm going to spend 10 minutes now just digging into the topic of what accessibility means at Microsoft now, in the year 2021. I started my career 25 years ago working with disability technology with this thing in the top left-hand corner of this screen, the pneumatic page turner, which used air pressure to essentially turn pages on a newspaper. That was an early insight in my life into exclusion. The news, what was going on in the world. People with disabilities were routinely excluded from reading the newspaper because newspapers weren't designed for people with disabilities, with physical disabilities. It was an amazing kind of start to my career, especially as I started in chemistry, actually, believe it or not. I just wanted to do something more sociable, more interactive, more engaging with my community. I soon migrated into working with people with speech disabilities through Lightwriters, which is now owned by a Norwegian company. And then I worked with Stephen Hawking with his communication aid before joining Toby in Sweden for the last 10 years of my career before Microsoft. And throughout my career, it was always focused on the individual. We always met the person with the need. we were really focused on essentially the individual solution at that individual point of contact. About 5 years ago, I joined Microsoft because I could start to see what was happening out there. People were starting to talk much more about the structural accessibility of technology, not just essentially the hack, the fix, the solution, but they were talking much more about this is not designed for people with disabilities. It became more of an overarching design conversation than just about the innovation around the assistive technology. Every single piece of assistive technology that works out there is incredibly innovative, but essentially it's being designed around an imbalance, an exclusion. We're now moving into a world where the technology is going to be capable of some of those things, just to go back, sorry, some of those things that will happen, some of those things that create exclusion. We now live in a world where pictures can be recognized and described for people who are blind. We live in a world where speech recognition is becoming incredibly accurate and can be optimized in the moment for increased accuracy to support people who are deaf or people who don't have first language skills. We're also starting to see that people can interact with technology using more than just the cursor and the mouse, using voice, and having much more control of technology with voice than ever before in human history. And so the challenge now, I think, is for us to start looking at these emerging technologies, reaching out to the innovators designing assistive technology, but also reaching out to the organizations within the public space or within our societies where people with disabilities are or increasingly want to be. And I would include the workforce in this. Now, part of our mission at Microsoft is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. This new focus of Microsoft is much more kind of customer focused. Essentially, it's not so much about us creating the best solution and selling the best solution. It's about us building technology in partnership with organizations around the world, large and small, meeting the smallest innovators, looking at what they're doing with the latest emerging technology, but also engaging with the largest organizations around the world and helping them build their digital platforms. So when we think about the lives of people with disabilities, there's so much more we can do as Microsoft to actually start to deliver platforms, industry-specific platforms that are increasingly accessible to people with disabilities. Can we start to build in inclusive healthcare, inclusive education, inclusive banking, only if we have these conversations? And so essentially that's my role at Microsoft, to get across to people that we are a connected society, to get across to people that the people who use technology nowadays are much more diverse than ever before, and to start deliberately building people with disabilities into the experience. We make sure that people understand some of the nuts and bolts of disability inclusion, vision, hearing, mobility, some of the things that people quite often think about when they think about disability and technology. But increasingly, and very interesting for the larger community, or the community at large, we're starting to talk much more about learning difference, neurodiversity, and mental health. And these are issues that are really starting to impact many of the largest employers and largest organizations around the world, particularly through this pandemic period that we've all lived through. We're seeing rapid digital transformation happening around us. But what's also starting to happen is that this conversation about disability inside workplaces and inside organizations is starting to find voice and being amplified. We take the responsibility of accessibility incredibly seriously at Microsoft, not least in the kind of the legal requirement of our products, but actually what we like to think more as we engage on the why of accessibility. It's getting across to people that only 1 in 10 people get access to the products that they need, and that wherever we can find the data, there is double the unemployment rate for people with disabilities. We look at Microsoft products, Office, Windows, Teams, and we say, if these products are inaccessible, we risk creating unemployment for people with disabilities. We take away the chance for people with disabilities to be included in the workplaces around the world. So, we've had 5 years of learning much more about this topic, really starting to invest much more in our product, And we're starting to get loads of people talking to us around the world, around the products that we're building, particularly with accessibility in mind. But as we move forward, we're thinking about our new commitment in this space. We want to make technology that's affordable and readily accessible and discoverable. Make sure that people find the things that they need built into the products that we create. We also want to help organizations around the world understand the importance of skilling of people with disabilities and the skilling of workplaces to incorporate people with disabilities. If you know about accessible technology, you're much more likely to employ somebody with a disability. If you don't know how somebody who's blind reads an email, then you're never going to give that person a job when you meet them. So we need to work two ways on the skilling and the routine skilling of people with disabilities, but also the skilling of workplaces to create inclusive workplace culture. And that's something where we think we can really share some of our learnings. And so we see disability as a strength at Microsoft. The more disability we have inside Microsoft, the more feedback we get around what we're doing, but also the more diverse thinking we bring into our organization. We absolutely need more people with disabilities inside Microsoft and more people hiding their disabilities inside Microsoft to share their lived experience. When people share their lived experience with us and with our products, we start to create better products. Examples might include Teams captioning and a blurred background. This is Swetha. Swetha works with us in our AI team at Microsoft. Swetha's deaf, she won't mind me telling you that. And she created the blurred background that we see all around us in society. You'll join meetings all the time where people have turned this feature on. It was created to support her lip reading, her need for lip reading. She created that innovation for herself. And now we go out and we sell that product for security reasons. The idea that you can hide things that are behind you. This innovation came from the lived experience of disability inside Microsoft. What that's also leading us to is a greater experience within those built-in accessibility settings in Windows. People are telling us what they need inside Microsoft, and that's driving updates. So if you haven't looked at the Ease of Access Center inside Windows for a while, go and learn that the magnifier has Read Aloud built into it now. Go and see the color filters that you're seeing here on screen for people who are colorblind. We're constantly iterating our products to be more inclusive. Now, an example of where AI comes in here is the automatic description of images for people who are blind. Every single image you put into an email or into a document now uses machine learning to describe it. And I've got some of the descriptions up here in Swedish and in English. And some of you might notice that the English are more accurate than the Swedish. So there's work here that we need to do to start to create a more equitable experience around the world. This is all to do with the data set that AI leverages. We need data sets to be more inclusive and to give us more global experiences. Now, another example is the Immersive Reader that's built into every website in the world. This was designed with dyslexia in mind, but now it supports people with all reading abilities around the world, and it's built right there in your browser. Right-click, Read Aloud, or right-click and enter the Immersive Reader on any website in Edge. Now, just to close, I wanted to tell you about the Xbox Adaptive Controller. This is a piece of pure assistive technology that was created by Microsoft to allow people with physical disabilities to game. This created a load of energy inside Microsoft about us delivering assistive technology at low cost globally. But what it led to was people across the industry of gaming to design more inclusive games, design communities of people with disabilities talking to each other about how we could create more accessibility in that industry. And that's the analogy I want to leave you with. We create great energy around innovation, but the long-term impact we want to have is on industries to start creating more inclusion, whether it's in education, employment, healthcare, banking, etc. Innovation does spark some of that. And so what I'd like to leave you with is the AI for Accessibility program. We want to invest in innovative projects, but we want to innovate in specific industry-led innovation projects. And so if you are thinking about how you want to innovate your industry moving forward and create more inclusion, get in touch with us to learn more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hector. What a great message to leave us with. If you have any ideas of great innovation, get in touch with Hector. I would like to ask you a question, Hector. I mean, during all this time that you've been working with these issues at Microsoft, what is the most important lesson you've learned? I mean, working with these issues within such a big company.
Representation is absolutely critical. So many organizations that we meet around the world don't necessarily give deliberate voice to people with disabilities. The more that we can actually create that internal conversation leads to better external outcomes. And I would include government organizations in this as well. The people who care about your success as an organization are your colleagues and your employees. And so I think it's critically important that we deliberately reflect on ourselves, the product that we're all creating. Now, when people go and say, oh, let's go and do some market research and go and find out from our customers, the lens is slightly different. So I think having that internal conversation about disability really helps get that buy-in about what you're delivering to your consumers, to your citizens, to the public. I think that's critically important. So the more representation leads to more credible delivery of product. And I always remember in my years working with assistive technology companies, I would argue that sometimes there was too much designing for people and not designing with people. Some of the best bosses I had were people with disabilities inventing for themselves, and then they built businesses off the back of it. So I think just having credible lived experience and spending time investing in lived experience is the trick.
So thank you very much. I'm happy to hear that Microsoft is leaving us with the same message, actually, as the global goals. Nothing about us without us. I have another question for you. Many of the AI-based solutions today that exist, for example, speech-to-text, live subtitling, all of that is almost in English, right? And this is a Nordic conference, so of course I have to ask you, what are you doing to include the Nordic languages as a part of these functions?
So it's not just Nordic languages, so don't feel bad. This is about data set size. So if you imagine, the biggest data sets are in English. In fact, some of the most accurate captions that we see nowadays are English being spoken with a strong Indian accent, because again, we have huge data sets for that audience. Now, increasingly, we'll start to see it's about when we get to the bar of confidence with a data set before we deliver it. Now, all of our data sets for speech transcription, for example, are out there for you to test. You can go to translator.microsoft.com and you can actually start testing what Norwegian sounds like, or what the accuracy is like for Norwegian. What you should also then do is look at how we start to land those products. So if you go to Word and go for word transcription, or you go to PowerPoint for PowerPoint captions, you'll start to see all of those languages are there, but they're not there in Teams yet for live meetings. And this is all to do with the amount of information we can glean to drive the accuracy. So just stay with me a minute, Hannah. If you think of a presentation in Norwegian with Norwegian words in the PowerPoint reads those slides and helps you get accuracy so that we're reaching that bar of accuracy. And that's why we've put Norwegian out. When we go into a random Teams meeting where somebody's speaking Norwegian, that we've got to get more data before that gets to an accuracy level. So the trick is with AI is what level of what size of data set do you have, and how can we start driving more of that forward? But the aim is for us to go global on accessibility. All these things will exist and will come, but we've got to work harder to build those data sets.
Thank you so much. I mean, this is really interesting. I mean, I learn a lot listening to you. I would actually ask, we have Emily with us, and I would like to, because Emily is looking at the chat, and do we have any questions? Perhaps a short question just for Hector.
Yes, there are some questions, and if we are short of time, I have to choose one. Yeah. So, what do you think of cooperation with game developers? Many peeps in game design are very creative and have developed technology which could also be of interest for people with special needs.
Yeah, I think this is fantastic. Yeah, there's amazing creativity coming out of the games industry right now around disability. And I think I'll tell you now, a lot of it is sparked because they have deliberately created forums for people with disabilities to communicate with the industry. So if you think of just the very nature of gaming nowadays, for any of you who are gamers or have kids who game, most of it is not just the game, it's the community. And so what they're doing is they're deliberately investing in those communities, and the communities are telling people, what they need just from the gaming industry. The closer that we drive that relationship between people with disabilities and those industries, the more exposed people will be to what people need within that industry. But also, people with disabilities see what's coming down the track and they say, I could use this. So an example is, if you look at something like Seeing AI, our app for vision, for people with disabilities, people who are blind, to use artificial intelligence to narrate the world around them. That came from an amazing developer at Microsoft called Sakib, who created that app for himself because he was living in a world of machine learning and he could see what was possible, so he innovated for himself. So I would say it's proximity and empathy both ways is what we're aiming for, and you only get that if you have great representation within your community or within your business.
Wow, thank you so much, Hector. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us this brief but very full of information presentation. And you will be joining us again in a little while when we're going to have common discussions with some of the other speakers. So I say bye for now, but I also just would like to tell all of you listening that if you have any more questions for Hector, please do not hesitate to write them in. You do this through Slido. So you go into sli.do. Or you just, and then you write the code, or you can also do the QR code that is now in the picture. You just put your device towards that QR code and you can automatically write in questions. Otherwise, you just go into your browser, you write sli.do, and you use the code 034370. And now I would like to introduce our next guest and next speaker, which is Irene Kitsara, who works at the World Intellectual Property Organization. Irene has worked for the European Patent Office, the European Commission, and the Greek Ministry of Internal Affairs. Today, Irene is the product lead of the publication Technology Trends, providing analysis on innovation trends and technology insights. And she will now be speaking with us about emerging assistive technology. What is around the corner? Oh, I'm really looking forward to that. So tell us, Irene, what's around the corner? I hand over to you.
Hi, Hannah. Thank you so much, and thank you for this wonderful opportunity to be with some Nordic audience. I typically spend midsummer in Linköping, so it's even nice to be in this way with some Nordic audience. So may I start? Yes. So as you mentioned, I work for the World Intellectual Property Organization, and I'm leading a product which is a publication where we use patent data as an indicator of technology trends to see what is happening, who is patented what, where, and with whom. So in the words of Andrew Ong, who is one of the thought leaders in the area of artificial intelligence, he could not imagine any industry which would not be revolutionized by artificial intelligence. In the first issue of the Technology Trends report, which was dedicated to artificial intelligence, we identified 20 industries which were mentioned in documents as application for this promising fields such as machine learning, computer vision, and other AI functional applications. So we had examples such as agriculture, entertainment, so the gaming industry we talked about before, life and medical sciences, etc. So in this year's report, we published this May our second issue on assistive technology, and we could really confirm that AI was also revolutionizing the field of assistive technology. We looked at 7 different domains and we identified more than 350 assistive products and their accessories in areas such as communication, hearing, mobility, the built environment, self-care, and vision. We looked at innovation that happens in improving existing well-known products, and we should not undermine also the importance of that, because that can be really impactful on people's lives. And we looked also at emerging assistive technology, meaning products that use more advanced technologies or even introduce new assistive products. We also looked at the wider context, such as policy, regulation, standards, and we also got insights from 72 experts representing different industries and perspectives. So what we saw was that these emerging assistive products that we identified were possible thanks to what we called the enabling technologies, with artificial intelligence being one of them, but also others such as brain-machine interface, advanced sensors, new materials, virtual and augmented reality, advanced robotics, and additive manufacturing. So what we saw was that emerging assistive products were using at least one of these enabling technologies or a combination thereof to offer to the users more advanced solutions. And thanks to that, because of the use of these technologies, we could also explain some of the general cross-cutting trends that we identified across these 7 domains that we looked at. So we saw that assistive technologies are smarter. They tend to be more connected, more customizable and personalized. We also saw a convergence with other disciplines. We saw a convergence with data science, with medical technologies, and also we see a convergence with consumer goods. So we see a lot of these assistive technologies, which tend to be the specialized products for persons with functional limitations, to overlap with some consumer goods, either from the gaming industry, from wellness, all these wearables that we see in fitness and wellness. We also see 2 opposite trends. We see some assistive products which go towards recovery of function, so what we heard before about this fixing aspect, and we see some which tend to be less invasive, exactly because we have more advanced sensors, and that allow also for these applications in the consumer electronic goods. Looking at the innovators, the people who are behind these promising solutions, we have seen from what companies are concerned, from startups to multinationals. So we have these specialized AT companies, but we also see, because of this overlap, because of these enabling technologies, and because of this overlap with consumer goods, we see a lot of consumer electronic companies patenting in the fields of assistive technology. We even saw automotive industry in some mobility-related solutions, so exoskeletons, etc. We saw some activity from universities, but a lot of independent inventors. So people who really want to invent, find solutions for themselves or their loved ones who are facing some challenges. Now, how is assistive technology connected to the workplace? We could see a lot of different, there are solutions spread across different areas. So there are solutions which relate to having an accessible environment, so that we could see solutions related to smart homes, smart cities, or some furniture which are for accessible workplace. A lot in the communication. We see, of course, a lot the importance of ICT for the workplace. All these speech input related technologies, word processing, speech to text, gesture to text or voice, navigation aids, smart assistants, or sensor or brain computer interface to allow controlling of devices, just to name some examples. When we look at the future of work and the general trends, we are moving towards more teleworking. Things are becoming even more digital. So if we look at it, we can look at technologies which help access to more material, to education, so that one has the skills to access the workplace. Things that relate to recruitment processes, physically accessing the workplace, having an accessible workplace, and digital accessibility. It also depends on the type of disability we're talking about. And let's take a look at some of the opportunities that emerging technologies offer. So machine learning, computer vision, voice input, affective computing are very powerful technologies, and they can be used at the service of persons with disabilities. They can make some of the assistive technologies become obsolete. They can simplify some of those, or even offer new possibilities that were not there before. They can offer more intuitive and integrated solutions, and technologies which are similar to be used by persons with disabilities or more general population. They can also help to reduce stigma if one cannot really tell if something is used for a need or for out of comfort. In this way, they can allow mobility, communication, and digital accessibility. Through these technologies, disability can be used as a different type of input in these digital technologies, replacing so far one-sided expectation of what should be an input or how it should look like, which would exclude some users from the use of different technology applications. Technologies such as affective computing, which help identify emotions and share this with the user, can support workforce with cognitive functional limitations and support them understand better their environment and participate easier in a workplace. The increased use of assistive technology can contribute to what Hector was talking before about the increased use of data from all users, including the ones with disabilities. And if we look in a long-term future of AI, we can hope that AI will be able to work with smaller data sets and in this way service different user profiles, as diversity is a key characteristic of disability. Voice input technologies, computer vision, brain-machine interface, silent communications can save valuable time for persons with disabilities and make workplaces more inclusive. You can find more information about the e-publication, which is fully accessible on our website. And we also have information about how much of this technology is really in the market and how far they are in their commercialization journey, also in an accessible format. I look forward to your questions and to the dialogue, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Irene. This was so interesting. I have a question at once for you. Because listening to you, I thought a lot about this thing when it comes to consumer products. A clear trend that we can see now is that special assistive technology solutions are converged together with consumer products, right? So how do you see this relationship? I mean, for the future, how do you think it's going to look with consumer products and assistive technology?
So this is also a hope that I think a lot of stakeholders have, that this will lead to a increased market share and a market shaping. So the fact that there is more audience which is interested and more potential consumers, that can really lead to products which you mentioned before, you know, the solutions that are available for users around the globe. So if we have some products which can service all kinds of users, that can lead to a solution which will later be more affordable also for users which are, for instance, in developing countries. At the same time, we can talk about solutions which will be you know, the spectrum of possibilities will be wider. So right now it is about what can I have so that I can live with one single product. So what we would expect is that we see more variety in products which can be much more, you know, servicing people with disabilities, exactly because of the overlaps that we talked about with consumer electronic goods.
Thank you so much, Irene. I'm going to ask if we have Emily online and see if there's any questions for you also. There you are, Emily. Do you have any questions for Irene? Or just one here again, just a brief one, because we're going into a pause afterwards. But
yes, I have a brief question. How much of the innovative and new technologies in assistive technology are developed into real products, and how many become just prototypes or projects?
So when we look at these emerging assistive products, we have seen in this assessment that we did that only 18% are already commercialized. So I think 56% are in the prototyping phase, and that shows, the opportunity that this offers, and also the challenges that there are for technology developers to making it to the end market.
So thank you so much, Irene. You will be joining us soon again for a panel discussion. And we are right in the beginning, or in the beginning of the whole webinar, but in the middle of the first session, that is focusing on how can artificial intelligence become a door opener to working life for people with disabilities. And I will now want to introduce our next guest, that is John Paulin Hanson. John is a professor at the Technical University of Denmark. His research focuses on human factors and human-computer interaction, with a special focus on innovation and usability of new technology. Much of his research and development work has focused on the use of eye tracking technology for people with disabilities. And John will now be speaking with us a little bit about telepresence and teleworking, new possibilities for people with disabilities. So thank you, John, for joining us, and I hand over to you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. For more than 30 years, I've been working with gaze tracking involving people with severe motor disabilities, for instance, people suffering from ALS. And it's a pleasure to see how technology developments have made it possible for these people to stay connected with their friends, and maybe in the future they will also be able to monitor and operate a job as part of the workforce. And this is actually what we're working on in these recent years. We have combined now gaze tracking with different kinds of new technologies, including telerobots, and this is the kind of combination that I'll be talking about today. The first example I'll show you here is a person laying in a bed, wearing a pair of glasses, a helmet-mounted display for virtual reality. But of course, we do not expect people to walk around with these glasses in the future. So what you should imagine is a future where we'll actually have gaze tracking and displays built into a pair of normal glasses. But we like to work with extreme use cases, and this is an example of a person laying in a bed who is unable to move but still can participate in a meeting through a telerobot that he can control with his gaze. What you see in the monitor behind him is what he sees in the helmet-mounted display that he's wearing, and inside this there is a gaze tracking system. All of this, by the way, is built on a gaming platform called Unity, so it's a good example of this gaming industry having a huge impact on the potential way to integrate new technology.
The FOV head-mounted display is equipped with eye tracking and is placed on the user. The pink circle on the monitor functions as a cursor, which indicates the user's gaze point. A user may interact with the robot via an interface that contains several functions, such as a map and an augmented reality keyboard for text messaging. Routes to destinations can be programmed via gaze selection on the map. The user may create and edit waypoints, which the robot uses to navigate to the user's desired destination. Once the route is entered, the robot autonomously navigates to the programmed destination with the help of its integrated collision avoidance system. After the robot reached its destination, The user can once again control the robot via gaze in order to explore their full environment in 360 degrees.
Hi.
Of course, only being able to interact through gaze movements is a very extreme case. We have worked with people in wheelchairs who would like to be able to use their wheelchair not only to play computer games, but also to control remote devices like a robot. This next video will show a collaborative or co-creation process we made with some users at a care home using their wheelchair to interact with robots. You see this person wearing the headset, and the platform that we developed will allow to transform the motions of the wheelchair to the motions of the robot. And now he will be at the location of the robot, and it is a very compelling experience for him. He actually feels like being at the other location where the robot is. There are several potentials of this technology. It can be used for remote collaboration, mostly I would expect for knowledge workers, but it could also be used for remote operation. You can imagine driverless cars being monitored by a user remotely in cases it wouldn't be able to find its own way. Warehouse trucks could be driven by people remotely, floor cleaning robots, digital documentation of construction sites where you would like to know what have happened from day to day could also be recorded with driving robots and drones, of course. Security inspection, last mile delivery robots, and even agriculture robots is some of the new work types that we envision could be handled remotely by telepresence robots. Moreover, this technology would allow us to build in visual support systems for people with low vision, including, for instance, the ability to see contrast enhancements or focusing on the areas in the visual scene that you are fixating at. Exoskeletons is a very interesting new technology, now moving from the lab into an actual workforce with people working with support of exoskeletons to, for instance, carry heavy lifts. But we could also imagine these exoskeletons being used for remote assistance of people who are not able to fully use their hands or legs. We are part of an EU project building exoskeletons for rehabilitation of stroke patients. And this one is one we developed in Lego just to have an early prototype that we could play around with. And again, we use the gaming platform Unity to do all of the controls. It will later be integrated with a HoloLens system to have augmented reality prompting of the user to do daily stroke rehabilitation exercises. Outlook for the future? Well, I might say outlook for Japan because they are a little bit ahead of us when it comes to robots. I visited an conceptual cafe being operated by robots remotely driven by people with disabilities. So in the middle, you see a picture of one of the pilots driving the robots. The robots were serving coffee to the guests in this cafe, and they were having long conversations with the guests. All of them controlled from long distances all over Japan. This company, Oriheimi, developing the robots, they have a very successful product in the table robots you see to the right, which is 2 robots operated by 2 people with disabilities from 2 different parts of Japan, now having a conversation together. But the robot is meant for children, school children with social anxiety, so they can be at school and communicate with the teacher and their friends, and you can see one of them raising their hand as an indication that this person would like to say something. I would like to conclude this talk with a short SWOT analysis of telepresence for telework. The strengths we see are obviously that it'll be possible to include people into the workforce and thereby increase their quality of life. And the weaknesses is a risk of being isolated, not just isolated at home, but also isolated at the job place, because you might not get the same recognition as a robot as you would as a living people being there in real life. And we know that isolation is actually one of the biggest disadvantages of the working from home experience that many of us have had during the last year. We did a survey in Europe with more than 10,000 participants, and it turned out again and again that isolation is a real danger with working at a distance. Also, you may risk that some of the jobs that will be available for people with telerobot assistant presence would be quite repetitive, routine tasks. Opportunities, well, we'll see a lot of new technology coming, and all of that could support and improve on the telework done by telerobots. And it would be possible to work globally. So if you have a special expertise in some type of work, you could actually practice that all over the world. And finally, threats. If it's possible for people with disabilities to do the job via a robot, it may then also be outsourced to low wages countries outside, for instance, Scandinavia. And people might be victims of ignorance or discrimination, maybe even more so if they're only present as a robot. And we have seen examples of telerobots being bullied, people covering the camera of the robots and trying to close the door in front of them, or in other ways put up obstacles just to test how intelligent is this robot really. But on the other hand, if you knew that there is actually a living person making a work light out of, for instance, being the floor cleaner, it could be that you would relate differently to this robot. Finally, I would like to give a few examples of the research publications we have made within this area, and I encourage you to look up some of them if you find this subject interesting.
Wow, thank you so much, John. It's so interesting listening to you. I think for many of us, when we think or hear about robots, it's easier thinking about, for me at least, like some futuristic films or Star Wars, if you're brought up in the 80s like me. But I mean, the future is here and now. I have a question for you, though, because when you talk about future work life and you hear about robots, I think there is many people are afraid, or there's an anxiety actually, because you think about robots taking people's jobs away, and you often hear this discussion. But when I listen to you and I also know about your research, I know there's also like more a view of robots actually enhancing people, enhancing work life by technology. So can you just give me some brief reflections now? What's your take on that?
Well, I think Lars said it very well in the beginning. It is a double-edged sword, and technology in itself is not good or bad. We really have to have some policies around the use of them. And if one policy would be, for instance, that responsible workplaces would always think twice before introducing robots, and if they do, they would consider, could these telerobots potentially be used by someone who are not part of the workforce at this moment?
We will get back to that just briefly in the panel, actually, about responsible policies and things. Me being a lawyer, of course, I think these things are very interesting. But I do have one more question. I think Emily actually had some question coming in from the audience, so I'm going to let her in. So we will also let... Hi, Emily.
Hi.
Do we have any questions for
yeah.
John?
Yes, there's one question. Using the eyes to control is potentially very tiring since normal eye movements are scanning. How do you design for that?
Well, there are several ways, and that's actually what I've been doing research on together with, for instance, Toby. But the general experience is that users of eye tracking technology, they soon become very good at it. And you have, for instance, something called dwell activation, where you would have to look at a button for a short time before you activate it. And you see a lot of new ingenious interfaces that are designed just to be operated by gaze. So the keyboards we have today are designed to be operated by fingers, but in the future, we are confident that you would see completely different ways of interacting based on the fact that you're interacting with your gaze.
So thank you so much, John. I would like to now invite back, actually, Irene and Hector, and I'll ask you to stay now, John. I would like to actually start off where you ended. We talked about policies, right? And within, with artificial intelligence, that opens for tremendous opportunities, of course, but also risks. And within my working field, we speak a lot about sustainable AI and how to avoid prejudice and discrimination, and that actually AI amplifies that by bias. And now the EU has just proposed new legislation when it comes to the use of artificial intelligence. So, of course, I have to ask you, three experts like you, what is your take on that? Would you like to start, Hector?
I mean, regulation's a great thing, right? And innovation, it's that balance between regulation and innovators will constantly innovate without necessarily thinking about some of the human impact. And we need an educated political framework or educated policymakers to start kind of building an ecosystem that allows innovators to innovate while not having negative impacts on humans. I would just say, we've got many other regulations around the inclusion of people with disabilities, not least in how technology is purchased today, that is not adhered to routinely across Europe, right? So to me, a lot of this is regulation will sit in its place, experts will sit in its place, but the main role, I think, is to actually get these ethical considerations, both policy and implications, out into the mainstream, get them to the people who are actually building mainstream technology, building or selling technology and buying technology. I think there's so much more impact we can learn from existing regulations that are not having the impact they want or need to have, and go and focus on those as we move into this AI age and think about the impact on lives of people with disabilities.
Thank you so much. And Irene, what's your? Do you have any thoughts here?
Sure. I think that there are a lot of thoughts currently and a lot of discussions and regulation standards around fair AI, etc. And I think that there is this challenge that very often vulnerable groups tend to be, the ones who are more exposed to different risks that relate to privacy, and often they are not able to express their concerns or give their consent about the use or not of their data. And I think the key here is that we don't have the silos that we have the regulators working together, because I'm participating in the IEEE Global Initiative on Ethical Considerations, and there I have participated as a lawyer myself in some committees where you see the lawyers will think of some regulation not bearing in mind the limitations of AI, and on the other side, the technical people will not be aware necessarily of the legal implications. So there is always this balance between over-regulating or having a race to the bottom, like I want to advance and I don't care, and let's figure it out later. So I think it's not an easy task for anyone working in this, but there has to be this balance, and the co-design that was mentioned before is extremely important. Like not guessing what end users would maybe like, but ask them and make them part of the discussion.
So I would like to continue on with the question also. You also spoke about this, John, but in the beginning, we saw almost 80% of the people joining us today are from different kind of public authorities or governmental authorities. So of course, I have to ask you then, what would you wish for? I mean, if you could wish for authorities and politicians, what would they need to do? Are there anything that need to be implemented that is not there today that you would like to see to make your research or your work at Microsoft or your work more easy and to make the past go better and faster?
I would suggest one kind of regulation actually, to have a pilot license for operating tele robots. And we actually experienced when working with the users in wheelchair that they were extremely good at driving these wheelchair remote telerobots, because they could reuse all of the expertise they had from driving their own wheelchairs directly into driving a robot. And by having a pilot requirement that would take this into consideration, that there are people already out there who are very good at these tasks, it could be a way to promote that they would be the first ones to get the jobs that comes within teleoperation.
Hector, do you agree on that? Licenses for robots?
We used to have a license for computer use.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if people are as old as I am, but we used to have like a license you could get for using a computer. I mean, yeah, I think it's part of the journey. My call to action to people is knowledge and readiness, frankly. So many organizations are talking kind of about disability inclusion without having really any understanding of how people with disabilities use technology, even as standard nowadays. So one of the learnings we've had inside Microsoft is to drive out a big knowledge program across the whole organization. Every single Microsoft employee has to take level 101 on how people with disabilities use technology and how we need people with disabilities inside our organization. So there's this piece here that tech's going to carry on. Tech's just going to keep evolving. But the inclusion of people with disabilities in the process is the safest guard you have against us getting it wrong. Yeah, and that comes with confidence. When you know how a blind person reads an email and that my blind colleagues get through their inbox 8 times quicker than I get through my inbox through screen reading technology, you'll employ more blind people into some of those administrative roles, right? But people don't have that confidence. And that confidence comes from knowledge. Honestly, we have got the very highest leaders inside Microsoft. I mean, from Satya and Brad down, the people who you see on the television have taken their accessibility badge. They have learned how people with disabilities use technology. And I think that's the biggest call to action. Policy, you build better policy, you build better product when you have knowledge. And it's not difficult. It's just taking some time to go and learn.
It's very interesting listening to Hector, because a couple of months ago we had another seminar at the Nordic Welfare Center with the CEO of Tobii, and he was actually saying exactly the same thing. And then you always hear there's a lot of private companies actually speaking about that. So I'm very interested in how does it look at our public authorities actually? How does it look when the employment rates of people with disabilities? Do we actually work like that? Do we work with nothing about us without us, or don't we? It's an interesting question to pose to ourselves and government governments and authorities all across the Nordics, of course. Irene, would you like to add something? Do you have anything that should be done that public authorities and governments should think about?
I think I agree on the importance of create a common understanding, so awareness about different aspects that play a role. And what I see often is that everyone is working on separate aspects, and somehow I think what is missing is a more holistic approach to things, that we don't just look at needs, we don't just look at regulation, we don't just look at legislation, but we see like a whole product life cycle, that we see the whole context, because somehow there are this connection between these different phases missing. And then what happens is that we are lost in translation between technology, legislation, regulation, and somehow it doesn't seem to work. So we need to certainly change our paradigm.
Could the universal design become the norm for everybody, no matter if you're a lawyer or if you're working with? Is that an ambition? Should universal design be a norm? What do you think?
I'm happy to come in on that if it's helpful. 100%. Universal design is like empathetic design is really how I would describe it. Yeah, universal design is recognizing kind of a spark from an exclusion, but then just recognizing that loads of people benefit from this inclusive design. As I say, I always think this just comes first and foremost from colleagues working together and representation. We had the Canadian Minister for Disabilities at a Microsoft Summit recently, and she was explaining that the cabinet in Canada, the very highest level of government, all of the documents are made accessible now because she's there. And it was like, there you go. It was that easy. It was just actually making sure somebody with a disability was in the room and everyone's behavior changed. So I just think, if you just take that as a microcosm and then extend it out, universal design is kind of sitting there, thinking about what doesn't work in your environment right now, hacking on it, making it better, and then actually realizing loads of people benefited from that change you made. Proximity drives empathy. I keep trying to get that through to people. It's really about the closeness to people with disabilities that's going to make the difference.
Yeah, we have a lot of examples of that also in Sweden, actually, of change actually first coming after there are people with own disabilities actually being in the place and telling about it and showing it. I would like to actually turn out to Emily now, but because perhaps there are any questions from the audience as well. So I would like to have time to take them before we take a small recess in 2 minutes.
Yes, there's one question for Hector. How do I access the accessibility training Hector mentioned?
An internal badge. So quite often people will see our internal badging going out on social. But we have a training called Accessibility Fundamentals. I can share the link in the Slido afterwards, but it's ak.ms/accessibility fundamentals. We've also just released some LinkedIn training on modern workplace and accessibility. So I'll share the link for that in the Slido in a moment. But yeah, I mean, we're trying to be as transparent as possible with our training and make sure it's available more widely to the public.
Thank you so much. Hector, John, Irene, thank you so much for joining us for the first part of this webinar. We're very happy that you're so many joining us today. You're almost 450 people from all around the Nordics and even outside of the Nordics, actually, who are with us here today. If you want to ask questions to any of the participants during the day, we are very happy that you do. And please then log into sli.do. It's a separate function that we use. It's called Slido. So you have to go into through your browser, or you can just take any kind of a device that you have, perhaps an iPhone, an iPad, and you can just point it at the QR code that is now in the picture, and then you will automatically get there. But otherwise, just go into the browser and you write sli.do, and then you write the code 034370, and you will be able then to ask questions to all the participants during the day. During the first part of today, we have been listening to researchers and practitioners speaking about how can artificial intelligence become a door opener to working life for people with disabilities. And we will now continue on exploring innovation of new technologies. Just like in the previous sessions, you will be able to comment and write through Slido, as I just told you. But I would like to now start off by introducing Sverker Brundin. Hi, Sverker. I hope you're here with us. Yeah, there you are. Very nice to see you. Sverker is the head of the innovation competition at the unit for digital participation at the Swedish Post and Telecom Authority. And apart from the innovation competition, the unit also works with telephone and postal services for persons with disabilities, and on promoting development of accessibility and universal design in information and communication technologies. And Sverker will now be giving us a short brief note on innovation competition for universal design. So I hand over for you.
Okay. Well, I think I have to get back. Here's the first picture I want to show you. Well, we have a PTS have an innovation competition, and we have that because we think everyone should be able to take advantage of the possibilities of digitalization, regardless of functional ability. So we have an innovation competition at least once a year, and we want to strengthen the development of more and better digital solutions for people with disabilities and other vulnerable groups. We've had this competition for 10 years now. I've only been working with the competition since August, but we've financed 177 projects altogether, projects that have been funded with a total of 256 million crowns. And the 14th innovation competition had the theme Labor Market for All. It was announced 2017, and we had a total of 134 applications. This was very many. I think it's the record for the competition. We had 24 winners that shared almost 40 million crowns to make their ideas a reality. And it was a collaboration between PTS and the Swedish Public Employment Service. Every year we make a review of the winners up to 3 years after they have finished their projects. And we can see that from this competition, we had 5 of them that has reached volume distribution and creates a noticeable effect for many or a large effect for fewer. And it's quite many that of these, quite a big portion of the projects as a total that was quite successful. We can see that 2 of the projects are closed or the company is out of business. One example is student competitions that was rebranded as House of Education in 2019. They wanted to build a sort of a digital study counselor. And I spoke to the CEO, Pernilla Karlström, the other day, and she said that the innovation competition meant a great deal to them, and that the entire company has become 110% user-focused because of this. Another example is Lingio, that had a project called Professional Swedish for Everyone. And the CEO there told me that we have a huge benefit from the project and continue to continuously adapt all new functions to WCAG 2.1 level AA. Here are some lessons learned for a successful project. You have to test a lot and see what the users really needs. And we can also see that personal qualities among the leading people in the projects is very important. Okay, that's it.
Thank you so much, Sverker. That was a lot in a short time. I'm impressed. I mean, it's wonderful to see that these kind of competitions that you're responsible for, I mean, they actually create a lot of innovation and a lot of possibilities. But I do have a question for you, because when you look at research, it shows that a lot of innovative solutions, many of them stop at being prototypes. They don't become commercial solutions. So what do you think, what are key factors? What is needed for companies to invest in new solutions?
We can see some factors in our yearly evaluation. We can see that a bigger and more general actor with an already established solution is more likely to succeed than a smaller niche actor with a completely new product. And also, you have to look if there is a real need of the solution, or if it's just a technical opportunity, and other such factors about business development. So we give support to the winners in the competition. They can go courses and educations in marketing and go-to-market marketing courses and stuff like that. And there are some of the factors. There are more.
And when we will know about the winners of this year's competition, and where can we read about that? Is it in your webpage, or where will it be announced?
It will be announced. We will be announcing the winners in this year's competition that is about digital payment services. Mm-hmm. It will be announced in the beginning of June, so quite soon.
Okay.
And you will have a look at pts.se/innovation.
Okay, that's great. So we can both look for the winners, but also perhaps if we ourselves have great ideas and want to apply for the next year's competition. I would like to see if there's any questions for you, Sverker, from the people listening. Emily, is there any questions?
Yes, there's one question. Have you asked the innovation companies if they have employed persons with disabilities?
Yes, we have. And if they have employed such people, or if they have user groups with such people, we ask them that.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sverker. You will be coming back to us in a little short while for a panel discussion. So I thank you for now. And I would like to introduce and hand over to Marie-Louise Paulman Larson, who works as a project manager at DTU Skylab. It's the hub for technology-based innovation and entrepreneurship at the Technical University of Denmark. And Marie-Louise is also the project manager of Technology Leaving No One Behind, an ambitious partnership that aims at providing opportunities and support for students and startups to make inclusion, accessibility, a natural part of engineering new sustainable technological solutions. So I'm very happy to have you with us here, Marie-Louise, and I hand over to you for a short brief on technology for change and technology leaving no one behind.
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you very much for having me here. I'm very humbled to be among the speakers today. I'm also learning a lot from the webinar today. And as you already set forth, I'm today representing a partnership initiative that we call Technology Leaving No One Behind, that is powered by DTU Skylab and the Technical University of Denmark. And again, the platform here is a partnership we're inviting for people that want to take part in inspiring and creating opportunities for the future industry leaders and engineers to also focus on inclusivity. So I hope this is also a possibility to invite for new people to take part, whether you represent an everyday practice or a potential end user that the students could work on, or a potential industry partner and organization. Under the umbrella today, where we talk about how do we create the future of inclusive work life, one of the extremely important aspects of that is to inspire the future industry leaders and the next generation of engineers that is already taking part in developing technologies that is going to set the standard, but is also going to influence how we think inclusive work in the future. And that's part of the program that I'm representing. So I'll just give you a brief introduction of both DTU Skylab, the initiative, but also some of the first learnings that we've had since we started this initiative around 2 years ago. But as a first starting point, I want to just bring 2 words about the place that I'm sitting that's quite unique. So DTU Skylab is a learning environment and a living lab that's situated at the Technical University of Denmark. We work with innovation and entrepreneurship, but we do that very much in the framework as a learning environment. So it's not only for us to generate and create successful startups, but it's also to invite students of different backgrounds, not only from our university, to experience how it is to work with real life challenges together with external partners, and to learn how to work entrepreneurial and create new opportunities. And of course, we hope that a lot of these projects are flourishing after they work with them as new potential startups or together with the industries later on to create an actual impact. But we also believe by providing these opportunities as part of the education, we're creating a future of engineers that is able to navigate and influence how we're thinking inclusive around the workplaces and the technologies that we bring to life. We are a place that very much work physically around the ideas. So we have both workshops, facilities that the students can access together with the partners. We are also developing a new digital laboratory, looking at how we get more and more projects that focus on digital solutions. And then we have a number of programs where we're able to also bring these student projects further, whether it's advice, whether it's connecting with industry leaders, or provide them initial funding to build more sophisticated prototypes. The project Technology Leaving No One Behind is a partnership between an institute, DTU Management, that Professor John Paulin is representing, and the foundation that is able to both provide the support for us to enable this, but also a key focus on how we bring universal design to a technical university. Then it's in partnership with the Disabled People's Organizations Denmark and the Association of Youth with Disabilities, which are key partnerships to make sure that we have the voices of different users and challenges represented in the projects that we're doing. We both work within supporting education, entrepreneurship, and on a strategic level, trying to influence the university on how we look at inclusive solutions as an opportunity, both for innovation, greater market reach, but also to target these sorry, the Sustainable Development Goals, and making sure that tomorrow's engineers are leaving no one behind, and that it also has the social dimension of sustainability and not only just focusing on the economic and the environmental benefits. We do a number of initiatives, and it reflects very much the presentation we just heard, which is we want to connect the students with working on real-life cases. We want to provide a toolkit on how to work with universal design as part of the education. And then we're looking into various ways where we actually support these startups going forward. We have a great and vast example of students that are already trying to bring their ideas to life. And this is something that we hope to also do even further going forward. And I think one of the key learnings of the program has been that it's not only about focusing on creating new startups, but it's also making sure that tomorrow's engineers know that maybe unconsciously they will exclude different users from using the technologies that they're having. So this bias needs to be something that they know, and how to work proactively of creating more inclusive and universal ideas. This is a partnership initiative, so we also hope that this can be a way to spark interest among the listeners today of this webinar to join forces together with us to provide more opportunities for the future engineering students to work with inclusive design as part of their education and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marie. This was very interesting, and it looks like the future looks bright. How is it? How is the interest in social sustainability amongst the students of today and tomorrow? Is it huge?
I would actually say that it's growing, and it has been growing a lot also since last year, where I think all of us has felt excluded from different communities, but also from our education. So we have not only seen a growth, but a bigger interest among students to be involved in this agenda. So what is on our shoulders now is, of course, to provide relevant opportunities for students to collaborate with external partners to work entrepreneurial around how to build inclusive technologies going forward.
And how do you include people with disabilities in your development work?
So that has also, I mean, at least for the last year, been a growing experience, since we have not been able to meet physically. But I think that has also exactly provided the constraint for us to innovate the way to co-create solutions together with students. So we have used a lot of Zooms and webinars, but also living labs where people can be connected digitally, but sitting apart, both to co-design the solutions, but also to test various prototypes, not necessarily having to be in the same room.
Oh, I'm going to see if Emily is with us, if there's any questions for you, Marie-Louise. Yeah, there you are. Are there any questions?
Yes, there's a similar question. What is the key factor for good collaboration between researchers, students, and disability organization?
So the core here is co-creation and having an inclusive mindset. It means that it goes from defining and understanding a relevant challenge, but also in the methodologies and in the process that we're using. So we use a lot students as the driving force for developing projects. And we need to make sure that the way that they want to include different partners and users is inclusive in itself. So we need to go beyond post-it notes and workshops as we may traditionally have done it, but look at how we can create additional inclusive methods. And that's one of the elements that we're now trying to develop in this initiative, is a digital platform for inclusive and universal methods that the students basically can download and use.
Thank you so much, Marie-Louise. You will be joining us soon again for a panel discussion. But as for now, I would like to invite Johan Hammarström from Transistor. Johan is the CEO of Transistor. It's a Swedish hearing tech company founded originally already in 1953. Transistor was one of the pioneers within hearing loops, assistive devices for children, and supply for hearing healthcare in general with hearing assistive technology. And Johan himself, he has a hearing loss since birth. And one thing I read about you, Johan, is that in 2006, you flew as a pilot around the world in a small airplane. That was really interesting. So I hope we're going to hear a little bit more about that as well. So I hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me for this interesting meeting and webinar. As Hannah mentioned, I'm the CEO and I'm also the product owner of Transistor, which means that I'm responsible for the products and solutions that we are developing and offering to the market. And we are focused and dedicated in the area of hearing. This is pretty much my big passion, aviation. And actually, I have been working with aviation as well. And I have struggled hard to become a pilot and to become a pilot despite of my hearing loss. So that is a story itself, but this is me in the plane that I flew around the world in 2006. And this journey for me, why did I come into this area of assistive devices? It was actually the dream of aviation that brought me into this. I started to fly model airplanes and then I went up to bigger airplanes when I became older. I actually decided for this World Flight for Hearing project as a part of a journey for myself to be open about my hearing loss. I have hidden my hearing loss for more than half my life, and a lot of people with disabilities and hearing loss is very invisible. So therefore, it's a lot of stigma. And by this project, we removed a lot of stigma. Then I came into the business of hearing after my flight, and I started to work in a big hearing aid manufacturer company from Denmark, actually. And in 2012, I decided to run my own business, and I'm running Transistor and earstore.se since 2012. So what is the most common products around hearing? I think everyone knows what a hearing aid is. And a lot of people also know what a cochlear implant is. You see the pictures of those products now. What most people don't know is that this is just a fraction of the solutions that are out there to help people with hearing loss. And I am very dedicated to the area of more ways to hear because there are a tremendous number of solutions that you could use. And I will come back to that a little bit later. I see it as a stairway. First step is maybe a hearing aid, but a hearing aid is not a perfect solution. It's not like it makes you hear perfect. It just helps you maybe one step or two steps ahead. And by combining it with different other solutions, you could actually find ways of hearing in different scenarios, like big rooms with a lot of people, like this situation now, when I connect my hearing aids, so I get the sound directly into my hearing aids, and so on. So there are a lot of opportunities out there. So that's what we're working with. We're working with different solutions. We call it fler sätt att höra, which means more ways to hear. We find solutions and we integrate solutions in order to get further. And this is very exciting also for workplace, because workplace is generally a very difficult area of hearing. It's a lot of new voices, it's other languages, and it's more complex to hear at work than just hearing your kids or your people that you have around you, your friends that you know their voices better. So we were awarded as a winning company of PTS. So we did a solution where we combined hearing technology with AI to produce a new kind of assistive device where you can read what people say, and you could hear what people say. So we integrated this technology, speech technology, with the microphone technology, which is needed in order to get a good quality of the transcription and of the voice. So if this is also very exciting, we have used glasses, so people could use glasses and see the text in their vision also. So just a very quick summary. We see that consumer products are becoming more assistive devices depending on use. And we see that it's very important to bring people together, to work together. This PTS project was really important for us in order for us to work closer to customers, to users, to research, and so on. And we also see that we need to provide the people with the tools to hear better and to move better and so on. And that should be a public responsibility. And the last thing is that I also think accessibility is important, not only the tools for the people, but for tools for the environment, so that you could actually get further. So that is pretty much my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Johan. That was really interesting and inspiring also, listening to you and the work you do within your company. I do have some questions, because I know you develop a lot of products and solutions. But what do you think? Is there anything, because I asked some of the other people before, because we have a lot of people today from authorities and governments actually listening. So for companies like yours, for example, what political changes or initiatives would you like to see to make this your possibilities to create different kind of solutions go faster? Do you have any ideas there that you would like to share?
We see some challenges around the public tender processes, because the public tenders means that it takes quite much time to get in with innovations. It can take 4 years from you have a product till you actually start selling the product, because the public tenders is not performed more than maybe every second or every fourth year. So I think we need political initiatives, like for the example in workplaces in Sweden, you are able to get your assistive devices for your job, and you can get a new product. You don't have to wait 4 years for something to be procured first. But I think in general we need to see that the society is more adapting to the pace of the development. The pace of the development is going up and up. It comes product solutions faster today, and we need to have a procurement system that adapts to that.
So that's a good message to leave us with, a better and adapted procurement system. I would like you actually to stay also, John, because we're going to be having a panel discussion in a second. But before that, I think there are actually questions to you also from the people listening. So I'm going to ask if Emily is there. Yeah. Hi, Emily. Are there any questions for Johan?
Just a little comment or two comments. One person is writing, "Wow, I am surprised about a pilot with hearing loss. It's wonderful." And then also, I think with this presented technologies, we have to grow up in Lithuania.
So some inspirement from you, Johan, here in Sweden to Lithuania.
Yeah.
I would like to now invite both you, Sverker and Marie-Louise back as well for a joint discussion. And I actually would like to start off by asking a question, because you said, Johan, you started talking about, all access to different kind of assistive technology in workplaces. And previously, there were special assistive technology institutes in the Nordic countries. I mean, different kind of authorities that coordinated the national work with assistive technology. And more or less all of them have now been closed down. And some believe that there is now a lack of coordination in the work for development of new assistive technology. So I would just want to hear your take on that. has there been a big change since these authorities were closed down, and what do you believe has to be done? So, do you want to start?
Should I start?
Yeah, you can start.
Okay, I could just give my message on that, because I came into the business just as this was happening around hearing aids and assistive devices. And before, it was much easier to get the product on the list. It was evaluated and it came onto a list and it could be purchased. And this could happen during the year. What has happened now is that it more or less takes 4 years. Some regions has invented their own systems where they could actually take in some kind of products during the contract period. But the system now is not constructed for innovation. It's more constructed for inventing the wheel again and again. So we have a lot of procurements where they purchase exactly the same products, but again and again and again, and it's not driven for innovation. So I think we need a system that is better today to be able to motivate companies to actually develop products and sell products in this area.
So one of the most important factors, of course, and we've been talking about this during the day, but it's actually having people from different sectors coming together. And I know that today with this webinar, that's one of the ambitions from the Nordic Welfare Center, having both authorities, of course, but also startups, the private sector, the academia, research, and also non-governmental organizations meeting actually and discussing these questions, because that's the only way to actually go forward. And I want to ask you, Marie-Louise, is the situation the same in Denmark? So how is it in Denmark?
I mean, I think, especially also with the startups, I mean, to survive 4 years in a tendering process where you're actually trying to create a change and create impact into projects sold to the public sector is often something that may have the startups diverge into looking into consumer opportunities or other markets, and it's really a lost opportunity and a potential to collaborate with the government and the public sector, right? So we have a big movement within innovation in general in Denmark that's called GovTech. So a stronger collaboration between startup environments and the government that exactly also wants to understand and keep updated on what's going on the technology side for them to be able to adapt quicker. And it seems to be valuable, but I think there is a loss of opportunity of how we could also strengthen this going across the Nordics.
Svensk, I know you work in another authority. I don't know, but what's your take on this? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, our focus is more on mainstream solutions and universal design than on aids. But our experience is, I think, also that innovators need an arena to test their products, and that it would be helpful if the public sector, like the county councils, would dare to procure more uncertain but innovative projects so that the entrepreneurs can enter the market.
I have another question that, of course, I have to ask, because even though I really hope that in the Nordic countries we are now in perhaps the end of the pandemic, we are still in the middle of a global pandemic. And one thing that we have seen is that the pandemic has enhanced the pace of digitalization of society and working life in a tremendous pace, right? But how do you see this? How has this affected the development of innovations and solutions? Has it affected? Has it gone quicker? What have you seen? Marie-Louise, would you like to start?
Yeah, so as I also mentioned in the presentation, constraints drive innovation in new ways, right? So I think from our side, we have not seen a drop in startups, and I think we may even have seen an increase of people wanting to work on inclusive solutions, but also thinking how new digital solutions can actually be able to bring people together in new ways. But I think we also have to be aware or create attention on other dimensions that might then be challenged in terms of ethics, in terms of how we're actually including people and still making sure that it doesn't go on the cost of actually testing things in real life situations and connecting with people real life. So let's not be all digital, but let's use it as an enhanced element in the co-creation processes.
Yeah, a lot of people are talking now about hybrid meetings, and you were also talking about that your students were looking at new solutions. What do you think, Johan? Has there been a big enhancement in innovation and solutions during the pandemic?
I think we have seen a giant move towards digital presence in every kind of way. In e-commerce, we also see that people, these social media platforms are growing. People are talking and discussing solutions. We see that people are helping each other. One hard of hearing person is helping another hard of hearing person to make it better. So we have huge benefits from this digitization when it comes to the possibilities of making a change. So I do think that also innovation, we could just look out ourselves. We started this project with PTS with one thought about how the world was, but we ended with the project in another way. We needed to move to digital. We needed to meet our customers online. We didn't understand that because people don't go to hospitals when in a pandemic if they don't really need to. So we needed to meet our customers online. We didn't understand that from the very beginning, and in the project we learned a lot of lessons. So yes, it does affect in many ways.
Oh, and Sverker, what have you seen at your authority? Has there been more people applying for your contest, for the innovation contest during the pandemic? Has it affected some way?
I can't say that. It has been more people this year than any other year. I think it depends on the theme of the competition. There have been a lot of talk about how to include the digitally excluded people, especially elderly people, and there has been a big debate on how to use bank ID, the digital legitimation solution we have in Sweden, the ID solution, so that you can use payment services and a lot of other things too. Also, of course, there's a lot of focus on video conferences and webinars like this.
I would like to ask Emily, are there any questions from people listening to our panel?
Yes, there's one question. How do we get the big Nordic companies to become more involved in universal design?
Ah, good question. How do we get the big Nordic companies to be more involved in universal design? Who wants to start? Does anybody feel, oh, this is my question? Otherwise, okay, Marie-Louise.
Yeah, so I mean, from our side, so we are already working with some of the big Danish organizations, and we very much use the students and the entrepreneurs as the driving force. So we invite bigger industries to partner with us on some of the challenges that they have, and onboard a co-creation journey where we challenge existing technologies or some of the technologies that they're looking into putting into the market in the future through a universal mindset. So both looking at how they potentially already exclude different user segments and what are the opportunities, both from an innovation angle and a market angle, to be more inclusive around the solutions. So we very much invite big industries to partner with us in different innovation formats, but it all starts with knowing what are the challenges and the opportunities along the way. And students are very interested to join this, right, as a competition or as a partnership in other setups.
What do you think, Sverker? How do we get the big companies to work more with universal design?
Well, I think they need to see what values it brings to them and for them. And I think, there is, I think the focus is more on that angle now than before. And there's a more general focus on social questions and so on. So I think they will be more aware of this.
Thank you, Johan, Marie-Louise and Sverker, for joining us today. We have, since 1 o'clock today, been speaking about how can artificial intelligence and technology create a more inclusive work life for people with disabilities. We've been listening to researchers, practitioners, and people, startups, and different kind of companies telling us about different kind of solutions that they're working with. And for the next hour now, we will be looking even further on how the pandemic right now has affected the situation for people with disabilities. How has both the pandemic and teleworking during the pandemic affected inclusiveness of work? And to speak more about this with us, we actually have our first guest here today, which is Daphne Arendt. Welcome, Daphne. Daphne is a senior research manager in the social policies unit at Eurofund. 2 weeks ago, they published the results of Living, Working and COVID-19 e-survey. And Daphne will today present some findings from the survey about how COVID-19 has affected the living and working conditions for people with disabilities. And she will also share some of the main findings from her research on the policy developments in the member states. So I hand over to you, Daphne.
Oh, thank you very much, Hannah. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to join you at your very interesting webinar. As Hannah already said, my name is Daphne. I'm a researcher at Eurofund. We're based in Dublin, and we are an EU agency responsible for developing knowledge to improve living and working conditions in Europe. So let me see. Yes, my presentation today is going to be quite broad. I'm going to talk about two things, as Hannah already said. On the one hand, I'm going to share some findings with you from our e-survey, and then I'm going to present very quickly in the 5 minutes that I have some findings from our latest report. If I move first to our e-survey. So our e-survey is was fielded in all 27 member states, and we've done 3 rounds of it, starting in April 2020, just when the pandemic began. And then we've done a second round in July 2020, and our latest round was actually carried out in the spring of 21. And in that round, we finally included questions that help us to identify whether people have a disability. And that's, of course, very interesting and silly that we didn't do it earlier, but it's work in progress. And I'm going to show you 3 headline results. I wish I could show you more, but I don't have the time, where we compare the Nordic countries with the rest of Europe. So this first slide shows you the life satisfaction of people with and without a disability across 5 country clusters. And the Nordic cluster is the one on the left of your slide. What I really wanted to highlight is that irrespective of where you are in the EU, the life satisfaction of people with a disability is lower than it is for people without a disability. This is something that we have already found on our surveys before the pandemic hit, so it's not all that surprising. What I did think was quite interesting to highlight is, in fact, that the gap between people without a disability and with a disability is quite large in the Nordic countries. So it's larger than in some of the other clusters. And that's interesting for, I think something that might warrant some further analysis, but maybe we can also come back to it when we look at some of the stuff that I will be presenting in my when I talk about my second report. So my next slide then, no, sorry. I want to go back. Oh yeah, it's this one, apologies. So this slide shows you the average scores for the 5 clusters on the World Health Organization Mental Wellbeing Index. And this index is based on 4 items that ask people about their positive feelings in the previous 2 weeks. And actually it's used often as a tool to identify the risk of depression. And again, it's interesting to see that, it's not surprising to see that people with a disability score lower, but again, I think the gap between those without a disability is quite high in the Nordic cluster. Okay, and then the third finding that I wanted to share with you is about trust, trust in institutions. And I think trust in institutions is an important element of social life because it's very much influenced by how you rate the quality and accessibility of public services. And what we find for all the institutions included, but I think for the purpose of today's presentation, the healthcare system and the national governments would be the 2 institutions of greatest interest. But what we see is that in the EU as a whole, but also in the Nordic countries, the results for people with disabilities are less good. So people with disabilities are tend to be less trustworthy of their institutions, and that could well be related to the fact that they are using public services a lot, have experience of public services, and it just shows how important it is that these public services are of good quality and easily accessible to people. And then the last result that I wanted to share with you is on teleworking. So this one highlights the percentage of people that during the pandemic were only working from home. And I didn't join your discussions earlier today, but and so perhaps it's not surprising for you to learn that overall these were done less often, or teleworking was done less often by people with a disability. And I'll come back to that when I talk about my next report. Because as Hanna already introduced to you, we carried out a study where we looked at the labor market integration and the policy trends in the EU member states. And I think it's important to explain that the reason why we did this study is that the labor market participation rate of people with disabilities remains a major challenge. And this is also the case in the Nordic countries, where despite quite favorable macroeconomic situations and a generally high employment rate, there remains a gap between the employment rate of people with and without a disability. And in fact, you all know that the Nordic countries often score quite well, but just to tell you that the gap is I think high. So it's 20 percentage points, for instance, in Denmark. So 81% of the population, working age population in Denmark, without a disability works compared to 61% of those with a disability. And so, and similar rates for Finland and Sweden, where above, it's less bad than in the EU as a whole, but there are some countries that are doing better. So for a change, the Nordic countries aren't, let's say, the leaders. And I think it comes to show that labor market policies alone do not suffice. There are many other factors that make it difficult to close this gap. So things like disability-related stereotypes or bureaucratic difficulties in accessing the available services contribute to making it more difficult to participate in the open labor market. But often we also see at higher level that there is a lack of coherence or a lack of a strategic vision. And there's a lot of fragmentation, so a lot of different services sort of operating in silo. So in the report, we analyzed, and it was very much an explorative exercise. We analyzed 154 examples of policy measures from across the EU. And we grouped them into 4 categories that you see on this slide. The 4 categories are job creation. So these measures have a direct impact by generating, for instance, better hiring policies or supporting self-employment and entrepreneurship. Around a third of our measures came from this group. Then we have 54 measures that provide support to job seekers or employees. Then we found 33 measures that aim to ensure the right conditions from a labor demand perspective, so providing support to the employing organization. And finally, there were 23 measures that aim to have a direct impact on the institutional environment. So these include the legal and policy frameworks, the provision of matching services through well-functioning public employment services as examples. And then in the Nordic countries, there were 18 measures. So out of the 154, 18 come from the Nordic countries. And some examples, I'm sure you know them already. So from Denmark, we had the Club Job initiative, which we think is a good example of creating alliances and partnerships, because it creates a large number of jobs for people with disabilities through nationwide agreements with companies, connecting people together, so connecting municipalities, employers, and job seekers. Then from Sweden, we had Samhall, which I think is a good example of enabling people with disabilities to make the transition from sheltered employment to the open labor market. And then in response to Finland, I thought it was interesting to highlight that there the municipalities quite quickly developed alternative ways to tackle the disruptions of provision of service provision during the pandemic. So when it was no longer, when they were shut down, they shifted to the digital provision quite quickly. And in fact, they learned from this that more people were reached than prior to the pandemic. So it was a lesson learned in a way. Now, I have to say, when we then looked at what the impact of COVID was for people with disabilities, or how governments and other public institutions responded, we found that because it was quite disruptive and sudden, of course, and unexpected, most of the measures that have been implemented have not focused specifically on people with disabilities, at least not the ones that we have come across. They indirectly focused on people with disabilities in the sense that they were trying to alleviate the income loss of workers or businesses. But in a way, you could also argue that people with disabilities were hit harder because finding a job or accessing new work was very difficult. Job loss hit people with disabilities disproportionately only already because they more often work in temporary jobs. On a positive note, we had what I call a real-time experiment. So finally, we got a chance to test live how teleworking works and what it's meant for people to be teleworking. And overall, it's been a big success, I would say, although there are a lot of challenges that need to be overcome. But one thing I think we have realized is that teleworking will stay post-pandemic. So in that context, what we learned talking also to experts from different organizations representing people with disabilities is that it's extremely important that the perspective, the disability rights perspective, is taken into account when we develop these policies, when these policies become the mode, let's say, to work and to involve people with disabilities in their design. I think that's really important. If we don't do that, we risk excluding large groups from being able to benefit from this potentially great development. And I will end, though, by saying that good teleworking policies on their own do not suffice. So if we want an inclusive and fair labor market, we also need good social protection for people that lost their jobs, and we also need good quality public services to be accessible to people. If we want to help improve the situation of people, the employment situation of people with disabilities. That's it for my presentation, Hannah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daphne, for sharing with us all this important information from your survey and from your research. I have an automatical question, of course, because the whole day today we've been talking about new technology and possibilities, and we do have a lot of legislation. I mean, both in the Nordic countries, but we have international law, we have the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, and still this gap. There is such a big gap, and you're talking about the Nordic countries in specific. Do you have any recommendations? I mean, what is the reason for this gap? Briefly, perhaps, if you have any reflection, but also, like, what should we do?
Yeah, well, I cannot really fully explain it, but I think it shows you that we need a lot of more research to be done here. One thing that we've learned from our study is that disability is really a very complex matter, and so the labor market policies on their own, as I said earlier, do not suffice. And even in the Nordic countries, where the macroeconomic situation is good, where employment levels are generally high, it's not working. And so could it not be that it is because the system or the entity is so fragmented and so approached from a silo point of view? And I think if we analyze sort of all these measures in isolation, we only get a partial picture of how they work. So I think in order to come to grips with this complexity and with the many elements that are involved in explaining disability and trying to understand it, considering the many intersections, being female and disabled, being young, being old, the intensity of the disability, etc., etc. I think requires us to really take a good look at the entire system and to consider the interactions as a whole, and not sort of this analysis of individual measures, because I think after so many years, we're still not able to close the gap.
Thank you so much, Daphne. I would like to ask you to stay with us now, but I would also like to invite Eivind Difranes and Ingrid Ime to a joint dialogue with us. Ingrid is the director of Telenor Open Mind, a program that focuses on including people with disability and immigrants with higher education and get them into the job market. The main goal for Telenor Open Mind is to get a hold of the brightest minds. And I know that Telenor has been working on spreading this model and programs to other countries in Europe, but also in Asia, where Telenor is operating. And we also have Eivind with us, and Eivind is an advisor at the Norwegian Association of Youth with Disability, an organization representing 25,000 young people with disabilities in Norway. And I would like to actually start off by asking you, Ingrid, I know that you have a long and a large commitment to the issue of inclusion in working life, and that you have been a driving force in Telenor's program Open Mind. Can you tell us a little bit more about this program? What is it? What is Open Mind?
Our mission is to give people with disabilities real life work experience to increase their chance of getting employment. A one-year program where participants gain valuable knowledge and real work experience. This way, they increase their opportunities to acquire work. The job training is matched to the candidate's education, competence, and a previous work experience. The win-win-win aspect is really important to the Open Mind program. Telenor gets access to relevant competence, and the participants get into the labor market, and our society gets value add from through active taxpayers. Also, we have a collaboration with the Norwegian Welfare Administration. None of our participants are guaranteed work during or finishing the program. They must actively seek work throughout the year. This is just an opportunity, an open door, and as you said, Telenor has this program in Norway and in Sweden and in Pakistan and in Myanmar. So for now, that's Open Mind.
Wow, that seems, I mean, that's already in a couple of places, so perhaps it's going to be in more places. I want to ask you another question. I know that you wrote a debate article, and in this, you actually raised the question of flexible working as a key factor for the future. And you wrote, we now have a window of opportunity to reduce inequality and increase inclusion. Can you develop this? Why do we have a window of opportunity right now?
Reduce inequalities and increase increase inclusion has been a manifest of mine for many years. Empowering people with disabilities by giving them options to access the labor market through our one-year program. In Telenor, we had the flexible way of work model with the option of working remotely when needed already before the pandemic. But the pandemic forced all of us to become better at working remotely and using the digital tools. After the pandemic, we know what flexible work models look like. And having adapted the way we work so dramatically and quickly, why not empower everyone? Increased flexibility can create the workplace better suited for diverse need, paving the way for more people with disabilities to enter our workforce.
Well, we really hope that, now after the pandemic is over, that all the things we've learned and gained and all these new flexible methods of working, that we don't gonna just throw them away and go back to how it was before, but actually learn a lot, at least from the positive sides of it. And speaking about positive, but also perhaps negative sides, Eyvind, I know that in your work at the Norwegian Association of Youth with Disabilities, you have made surveys about how young people with disabilities have been affected during the pandemic. Can you tell us a little bit? What have you come up with in your surveys?
Sure, thank you so much. So we have mainly done 2 studies. One of them was a survey that we did on our own because we wanted to collect information on how the pandemic has impacted our members. And youth with disabilities in general. So we sent out a survey and got a response from over 400 youth with disabilities last summer. And the findings were that a lot of young people had lost many of their rights, and on all areas of life, included in the labor market. Many felt that it was more difficult to gain access to the labor market. But at the same time, we also got feedback that telework has been positive for very many people because, as we've already mentioned here, it often involves more flexibility. It's easier to adapt the workday. There's no need for transportation, which is not universally designed. So there are a lot of opportunities also and positive sides. Then we also cooperated with the research institute FAFO for a larger study with them on the digital implementation of labor measures and how they've worked for youth with disabilities, working in work and inclusion employers. And for many, the findings of the study were that for many, digital follow-up had worked well. Many had done the planned activities. Some had gotten permanent jobs or internships. There was increased flexibility. But at the same time, the negative aspect was that there was a lack of social interaction, which was especially negative for people with psychosocial disabilities, but also for everyone in general, of course. There was a general lack of transition to ordinary employment. many also feel that flexibility can have a negative side because they need structure in their work life. So that's a possible negative side of flexibility. Several while there are several positive aspects of digitalization and teleworking, it cannot kind of substitute physical working, and it cannot completely substitute that part of working. So we have to look at kind of getting the possibilities that digitalization and technology give us, but also remember that we need to meet other people in the digital age.
Thank you so much, Evan. With the results from this survey, does your organization, do you have any conclusions or recommendations that you have for public authorities and other governmental agencies all around the Nordic countries when it comes to youth with disability in the labor market?
Yeah, we didn't have that many recommendations in terms of the report that was made by the Research Institute, but on the survey that we did, we had several recommendations. And of course, one of them is that in terms of the corona crisis and other crises that will hit us in the future, because of course, we will have pandemics and other crises that affect the labor market. We need to be better prepared so that people with disabilities are not that disproportionately affected in times of crises. So that's one big part that's important for us. Another thing is that you have to kind of use this opportunity in terms of increased use of telework as kind of a way to organize our labor market in the future. We've seen so many positive sides of working remotely, and we should not give up on that way of working, because we have realized that that it's possible to work in different ways than we thought was possible earlier.
Thank you so much, Evan. Emily, I think that there are some questions for Daphne and Ingrid and Evan from the audience, perhaps.
Yes. What kind of workplace innovations are needed to find an optimal interaction between inclusive technologies, work environment, work organization, and leadership, and respect for diversity in background, skill, and productive capacity?
Wow, that was a big question, but perhaps
Yes.
if you can answer that somehow, I can answer it briefly, perhaps. Who would like to start? Daphne, would you like to start?
Whew, that's a toughie. Yeah, I don't, in terms of workplace adaptations, I'm not a techie so much, so I wouldn't know the technical side of it. Again, I think my perspective or point, and maybe I sound a bit repetitive, but is to make sure that you listen to the people involved. So you don't just assume, but that you involve. This is an opportunity for adaptation, and to me, adaptation means listening to people's needs and just not just assuming. So, and I think another point, if I may, is that it's really important to keep telework a choice. So for some people, it might be very good, but for other people, and it was already said, the social element is very important. So you don't want to isolate or to be completely alone because you never leave your house. So again, I think there are many elements that are important, and also it can never be that it becomes a disadvantage, so that because you telework, you never see your manager, and thus he doesn't really know you, and so these kind of things also. So the social side, I think, is also important.
Thank you so much, Daphne. Ingrid, what's your take on this?
And I think the employers play such a big role. They are crucial in hiring employees with disability. And I think the attitudes and the openness to diversity and flexibility are crucial for successful inclusion. So I want to highlight the employer's role in the question.
Thank you so much. Do you have any last thoughts on that as well, Eyvind?
So I think that it's what is important is to listen to people with disabilities when it comes to the labor market and the future of the labor market. I think that technology and the digitalization gives us a lot of new opportunities, but it can also contribute to exclusion if we use it in a wrong way. And so I think it's important that this is something that's high on the agenda of civil society, decision makers, and that also the private sector cooperate with civil society and include disabled people in developing new technology. I think that's very important, because I don't think technology in itself is either good or bad, but it depends on implementation. And for us, it's very important that we have a human rights-based approach to inclusion in the labor market and to the future of the labor market.
So thank you, Evan, for wrapping up with those excellent words, having a human rights-based approach to our work, and also not seeing technology as something good or bad, but actually realizing that it can be both a matter of inclusion, but also exclusion if you do not have an intersectional perspective on working with it. I really want to thank both Ingrid and Daphne and Evan for joining us here during the last session. And I would want to really thank everybody who have been following us during the whole afternoon at this webinar arranged by the Nordic Welfare Center and the Swedish Public Employment Service, focusing on how do we create a more inclusive future of work for people with disabilities. My name is Hannah Gerdes. I am really happy that I've had the chance to be here today to try to moderate the seminar, and most of all to learn and listen with so many people, researchers and practitioners that have a lot of knowledge within this field. And I hope that all of you joining us today have also had new insights and ideas from our guests. And I hope that you've had a valuable afternoon. So with that, once again, I really say thank you for me. And I hand over to Lars Lindberg, who will say some final words. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been a fantastic webinar with so many interesting perspectives and contributions from presenters. And also that so many listeners to this webinar. I would also like to finally thank you to the studio Wisdom U, who have helped us with this streaming, this with the Public Employment Service. And finally, at last, the moderator, Hannah Gerdes. And as you said, you will see this recording afterwards, and with all kind of publication we will also send out to us later. Thank you.